Hello and welcome to February's book review. As you can see, I am not in my usual space, and that is because Pete has filled the bookshelf area with boxes as shown by this photo. So as you can imagine, I can't get in there to film said book review, so we're just going to have to film it from my bedroom. And just imagine that there's a load of books behind me. So February, we actually have quite a few books to cover. We have 5 books to cover this month because I was part way through one at the end of January. So obviously I finished that at the beginning of this month. So as always, I'll try and be concise and to the point so that I don't ramble on for too long for you. And this isn't the longest book review in the world, although I think my brother, the Grub Street Lodger on YouTube, his link is below, probably wins that mantle of the longest book review. I'm sure he's done one that's like over an hour. But anyway, let's get on to the books. So the first book I read or finished in February was All That She Can See by Carrie Hope Fletcher. Does she go by Hope? She does go by Hope on books too. Firstly, I want to comment on her dedications because her dedications are the most brilliant things ever. So this book is dedicated to the voices in our heads that tell us we aren't good enough. Do be quiet. And all of her books have dedications like that. They're not to a specific person, they're just to like a thing, a feeling, that kind of stuff, which I love. So just reading that set this book up really well for me. I really liked the dedication to this book, which is not something I would normally say because dedications aren't normally something I would pay that much attention to. This book, the concept is that Cherry can see everybody's bad emotions, so there could be frustration, depression, loneliness as like a big monster, or depending on how big that emotion is in the person, depends on the size of the emotion, if that makes sense. And she bakes cakes and things and fills them with counteracting emotions to try and help reduce that bad feeling for them. Yeah, she then meets Chase, who has the same ability but in opposite, and there's a whole saga. It's not really a saga, but you know, event that happens with the pair of them. I really liked the idea of that these people could see emotions and that those emotions were like holding you back and like they were actual beings, because sometimes it can feel that way. Certainly emotions do feel out of control sometimes. So I did really like the concept of the book and I really enjoyed it for the first like half of it. Yeah, so then it gets to the bit with the Guild of Feelers and that's where I lost interest in this book. I don't know where it could have gone in the same vein as the beginning of it, but certainly when they introduced that, or when Carrie introduced that, I just lost interest. I found it way too weirdly farcical when that came into it and just didn't quite enjoy that. I think it just took a weird turn that I wasn't really into. Like, don't get me wrong, it was an imaginative way to take the story and end the story, but it wasn't for me. I also found with this one, because I have read a couple of other of Carrie's books, that I could see her in this way too much. Like the other books, obviously they're written by her and there is one about theatre, so you know she's in it, and her experiences are in it. But this one, I could just see her saying it and writing it, so it was harder to disconnect, because obviously Carrie is a musical theatre performer, but she's also big in YouTube and all of that kind of social media world, so she has documented quite a lot of her life and it is out there for people to know, and I found it this way too close to her compared to her other books. So I did enjoy All That She Could See. Like I really enjoyed the first half, but then it just took a turn that I couldn't really get on board with. So that's All That She Can See by Carrie Hope Fletcher. Oh, I forgot to add, it really did make me want to bake though, and there are some recipes at the back of this book that I might try out. So the second book that I read in February was The Flip Side by James Bailey. And this is probably my favourite book of the month. It's all about Josh, who has a massive like breakup as he's proposing on the London Eye on New Year's Eve. So then decides that all of his decisions are bad and then just makes them by the flip of a coin. And it was just highly enjoyable, actually. I liked the fact that it got straight into the story. We didn't really have any faff. It was like, bam, we're going. And that's kind of how it went for the rest of the book. It's also an incredibly long time since I've read like a romance, this kind of fiction, but from a male perspective. So I found that really quite refreshing. Often, and at least the books that I've been picking up recently have all been female-led and a female perspective on each relationship. Or they've been like multiple, so you get half of what the man's thinking and half of what the woman's thinking. This is purely just Josh's opinions on his life and his road to romance. The whole idea of flipping a coin to make your decisions sort of appealed to me. I can be quite indecisive, so I liked the idea that just flip a coin and it makes it for you. But I do think that could be quite dangerous if you've got a this or that and one is way more out there than the other. I don't know. I like the idea of it just so that decisions were made, but also I may just disagree with the outcomes of the decision. I'm not sure I could just stick to the coin all the way through. A couple of little snippets of it. One, it really just highlighted the fact that I hate job hunting. As part of this, he has to do a lot of sort of life changes, and one of them is finding a new job, and the way that is written just filled me with anxiety again, because it's been a long time since I've had to apply for jobs, but I remember the pain enormously. It's not my favourite thing in the world to do. It's just all those forms. Ugh. But yeah, they really did bring that home to me. I think I'll be staying in my job a little bit longer because of it. Not that I had any intentions of leaving, but you know what I mean. And also Josh has this really sweet relationship with his granddad, and that was really lovely to read. There was also a moment where I almost got very annoyed with the main character because I thought that he was going to be how a typical man is portrayed. So I almost got very annoyed, but you'll have to read the book to know what I'm going on about, or if you have read the book you'll probably know which part I'm talking about. But yeah, the flip side was just a very sweet book. It was realistic, but it wasn't like really sickly with its sweetness. There were definitely moments that made me laugh. I'm not a big one at crying at books, but this did almost make me shed a tear. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. There was also quite a bit of travel in it, which I appreciate because I'm missing it greatly. So that was The Flip Side by James Bailey. And then I decided that I should probably start reading some of the books on my Kindle as well. I have a lot on there, but I don't tend to pick it up. I find reading a physical book easier. I tried reading on my Kindle when the first lockdown started and found that I couldn't get into it quite as much, so I just sort of put it aside and just read physical books. But as I've given myself a low buy / no buy year on books, on physical books, because we just don't have the space, I realised I'm going to have to start reading on my Kindle again, and I thought instead of just jumping in and reading a whole month's worth of books on the Kindle, I should start now and go sort of every other physical book, Kindle book, physical book, Kindle book, etc. So it gets me back into reading them. So the next book I don't have a copy of, but it is The Authenticity Project by Clare Pooley. The reason I picked this book was because it's supposed to be like the feel-good book of 2020, and don't we all need some feel-good in our lives right now? So I thought, right, I'll give that a go. It's supposed to be uplifting and enjoyable and all of that. Right, sorry, the memory card got off, so I had to sort that out, so apologies if any of the lighting or things have changed. Right, so we were talking about The Authenticity Project by Clare Pooley, which, as I probably said, is the whole feel-good of 2020. It follows a lot of characters, we'll get onto that, and they all put their authentic self in this book and then they just pass it on and it gets picked up and you know, they all interweave eventually. It did make me think about, you know, how we should have some connections, and obviously with the world as it is, it's harder for that to happen because we can't see people. Certainly for me, I don't really know who my neighbours are. I live in some flats and the turnover of people is quite quick, so it's quite hard to get to know them. But obviously there is that understanding of connection is important, and this is what this book sort of highlights quite a lot. I didn't really warm to the characters very quickly. It took me quite a long time to feel anything for them other than a bit of annoyance maybe. And I just don't see how this concept would work in London anyway. We don't talk to each other, that's sort of our main characteristic. London is not always the most friendly of cities, but you know, I just don't see how it would work in a big city like this. But as I said, there were an awful lot of characters in this. Every time the book gets passed on, there's another character coming in. So I think in the Authenticity Project it gets moved on like 6 times, maybe 7. So you're then following 7 characters and it is written in chapters for each character kind of thing. So you're never with the same viewpoint. And I like multiple points of view books. I do. I've said it many times in these book reviews. You can go back to them and see it. But I thought this was too many. I thought there were too many people. It was a bit like too many cooks for me. But I did like the fact that they were pretty varied in their age, in the gender. Obviously, I'm not really race. We didn't really get a particularly diverse race in this. But certainly the issues that they were facing and all of that was pretty varied in terms of, you know, age and gender and all of that kind of thing, which I thought was good. There was a pretty good twist in it that I didn't see coming, and that I appreciated. Certainly I got into it more as the book went on. It took me quite a while to get going with it, and I don't think that's because I was reading it on Kindle, because I feel like I got into the whole reading aspect of it pretty quickly. I just didn't really get into the book and the characters very quickly. But certainly by the time we got to the twist, I was a bit more invested in what was happening and in their lives and things like that. And everything I seem to be reading this month has some sort of travel element to it. In this one they go to Paris. Yeah, pretty much every book, bar the last one, had some sort of day trip, holiday, travel-y kind of feel to it. Obviously I'm being drawn to those kind of stories. Not that I knew I was, because I didn't know any of them had it in there. But yeah, so that was the Authenticity Project by Clare Pooley. Not my favourite. I didn't feel it quite as uplifting as it was supposed to be, but still a pretty decent read if you wanted to give it a go. So we then went back to a physical book and I read Where Did You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. Sorry, ring light glare on her glasses there. This is a pretty... I think a lot of people have read this now. I'm a bit late to the party with this one. I did read the first few pages in the doctor's surgery once and enjoyed the beginning of it, so that's why I wanted to pick it up at some point, and that point was now. The way the book is set out is pretty different. You essentially learn about the character of Bernadette through different emails and memos and faxes. Excuse the dog. And there are like little snippets of like narration which comes from the daughter B. So the writing style is different. Didn't take me that long to get to grips with it. I actually quite enjoyed it. It does change toward like the last 2 chapters of the book just go to straight narration, and I actually missed all the letters and emails and things like that at that point. I would have preferred they just stuck with it all the way through. But yeah, I liked the style quite a lot. In terms of characters, like B, the daughter, has some like serious knowledge going on, which is pretty impressive. And Bernadette is portrayed as like this reclusive, enigma-y kind of thing. You don't really get to know her that well. You do see her emails to her like virtual assistant in India, but you don't really get to know Bernadette, if that makes sense. And she at one point goes missing, hence Where'd You Go, Bernadette, and it's the daughter B trying to find her, and that's why you're seeing all of these emails and memos and blah 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 blah, because she's trying to pull everything together to try and work out where her mum has gone. There was also like all kinds of messy in this book. Like these characters, pretty much all of them have some serious flaws going on, but I guess that added to the entertainment. I was actually slightly disappointed with Where'd You Go, Bernadette. I think I had it in my head as a better book than it actually turned out to be, but it was still an enjoyable read nonetheless. I just think I expected more from it. Didn't quite get the hype, if that makes sense. But there you go, that was Where Did You Go, or Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. So the last book I read was on Kindle again, and that was Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. This follows a 20-something black woman in London as she's just had a breakup, and she then spirals into all sorts of bad habits and mental health issues, essentially. This is often pitched as a black Bridget Jones kind of book, but I wouldn't agree with that. I can see why, because obviously Bridget Jones goes through and has a lot of awkward moments and stuff like that, as does Queenie. But other than that, they're very different. Queenie is a lot deeper and a lot darker than Bridget Jones. I have read Bridget Jones, by the way. Queenie is a flawed character. Most of this book, you're kind of frustrated with the decisions she's making, because you can tell and you know that they're unhealthy for her. But also, on the flip side, it's really interesting to see how the fallout of it all happens, and the different sort of culture and the stigma that different cultures have on getting counselling and all of that kind of thing. This book just felt very, and I don't really like the word, but very real. It's set in South London, which is an area that I used to live in. A lot of it is around Brixton, which wasn't that far from where I lived. And a lot of the conversations I can imagine hearing on the back of the 35 bus as I was going from my house to Pete's house, as we were going through Brixton and those areas. It's the language used, the things covered. I could just imagine hearing it from people at the back of the bus, that kind of thing. But it did sort of touch on a lot of issues, so to speak. There's obviously quite a lot of references to Black Lives Matter and to the sort of casual racism that Queenie as a black woman faces. For example, the person that she was dating is a white man, and whenever she went to visit his family, there was just lots of sort of casual racism, and he never stood up for her when she got upset about it. That kind of thing. Just, there's bits about online dating, and it's just all about, you know, people trying to say, you know, I love your black curves, and just really, really manky stuff. Online dating, I'm glad I never had to do it. But yeah, so it did touch a lot on that sort of everyday, if you're blind to it you wouldn't really see it kind of racism. Certainly as a white female I would never have to face that kind of thing, so it was quite eye-opening in that respect. But also because she's a woman, there was added elements to all of this because of that, and then obviously quite a bit of it is based around mental health issues, which are quite prevalent at the moment, again, because we haven't been able to really do a lot, so people's mental health is struggling, shall we say. Perhaps. I did enjoy this book a lot. I wouldn't say it was like Bridget Jones at all. There are certain like trigger warnings that perhaps should come with this book. It's not quite that deep. I made it sound way deeper than it is, but yeah, Queenie was an enjoyable read and a good way to end the month. It was certainly up there with one of my favourites of the year so far. So there we go. There are the 5 books that I read and finished in February. As always, if you have any comments about the books, you've read them, you want to read them, you have any recommendations for me, please put them in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and if you haven't already and you fancy it, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!